So Bill Cosby got released from prison. All right, so we all know that one of the biggest stories over the past couple of days circulating mainstream media and social media is that Bill Cosby was released from prison after the Pennsylvania Supreme Court vacated his sentence and released him from prison. Now, I've seen a lot of videos and I've heard all of the dismay and disapproval of the criminal justice system, saying that this is a miscarriage of justice, that the attorneys and the judges are all very incompetent, and that now the victims are suffering because of it, and that future victims of sexual assault will be discouraged from reporting their victimization because of this. Now, I have my own opinion. Now, this may just be speculation on my part, but my opinion regarding this is that, so Bill Cosby's case was one of the first high-profile cases of the Me Too movement, right? The Me Too era. My thought is that Bill Cosby, him going to prison in the first place, was the result of an emotional outcry for justice for his victims. Him being released from prison is the Me Too movement backfiring on itself, and I'll explain why. Okay, I've read through the ruling or the opinion of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. 79-page document explaining in very great detail from start to finish, all the way back in the 1960s when Bill Cosby's first alleged victim was victimized. Came forward in the early, or mid 2000s to report that she was also victimized by Bill Cosby. All the way up to his release date, which was 2 days ago. So now I know I'm going to receive a lot of hate and a lot of blowback from this because I'm essentially insulting the Me Too movement. Now listen, I was a detective for 5 years with the Twin Falls Police Department. I investigated a lot of sex crimes. 95% of the cases that landed on my desk were bogus, were false allegations. Literally only 5% of those cases were actual legitimate cases where the victims were telling the truth and that their victimization was valid and legitimate. Now, I'm not saying that to be bigoted or misogynistic or sexist. That's just the reality of it. I've interviewed women who have filed sexual assault reports, whether it's rape, whether it's sexual battery, something like that. I've interviewed women who admitted to me that the reason they filed a report was because it was a case of, let's just call it buyer's remorse. Okay, they go out to the bar, they get drunk, they have sex with a guy, someone that they normally would not have had sex with, but because they were inebriated and their inhibitions were lowered, their judgment was not up to snuff. They had sex with this guy, they regretted it, and the only way they could think to save face was to file a rape report. Now, I know you think that probably sounds ridiculous, and it is very much so ridiculous and audacious for someone to file a rape report simply because they regret having sex with a person. Another instance would be a woman who has a husband. She cheats on the husband with a guy she meets at a bar or whatever the circumstances may be. He finds out about it. And again, the only way that she can think to recover from that and save face is to claim that she was raped. And then the pressure is put on her by her husband to report the rape to the local police department. Now, again, I dealt with many cases like that. Very few of the cases that are reported, at least in my experience, were legitimate, valid complaints. Now, that's only one of the few problems that you run into with sexual assault cases. The other issue you run into is a lack of evidence. Now, even if the crime is reported moments or even hours after the crime occurs, the chances of there being any evidence to corroborate the story of the victim is unlikely. Okay, and sometimes there's evidence. Now, evidence in a sexual assault case, whether it's a rape case, a child abuse case, any sort of case that involves a sex crime, the evidence that you're looking for as an investigator is a rape kit, okay, a sexual assault kit, a kit that's done on a female victim, where there's a vaginal swab to recover any fluids, ejaculate, DNA left by the suspect. We'd collect her underwear, collect her pants, collect her shirt, her bra, bed sheets, anything that might have DNA on it. Okay. But if you wait several years to report a sexual assault crime, that evidence is gone. Okay, it no longer exists. Now, without evidence of a sex crime, it's basically just he said, she said. And I know that sounds insensitive, but that's the way of it. That's the way the court views it. Okay, there has to be evidence to corroborate an accusation, short of the suspect confessing that he did commit those crimes. That's just the unfortunate reality of sex crimes, is that there's often not a lot or any evidence to back it up and to support prosecution of a suspect. And that was exactly the case with Bill Cosby. The district attorney who was responsible for prosecuting Bill Cosby, or attempting to prosecute his case, realized that there was a lack of evidence in his case, or in the case of the victim. And in all of the cases of all of the victims who came forward to accuse Bill Cosby of sexual assault. Okay. So Andrea Constant is the victim being sort of highlighted and showcased in all of this this media hype surrounding this case. Okay, so Andrea Constant first came forward, I think, around 2004, when Bruce Castor was the district attorney that was responsible for charging Bill Cosby, okay, or investigating the case, along with detectives from the local law enforcement agency. Now, as you can read through this article, it's later determined that Bruce Castor recognized that there wasn't any evidence, or there was a severe lack of evidence to actually be successful in prosecuting Bill Cosby criminally. He recognized that and strategically decided not to prosecute him. Now, when I say strategically, that means that if there's no threat of criminal prosecution, then Cosby has no right to Fifth Amendment protection against self-incrimination in any civil proceedings. So in an effort to get Andrea Constant some form of justice, Bruce Castor knew that if Bill Cosby would be compelled to make incriminating statements against himself in civil deposition, then he had to promise him not to prosecute him criminally should he make incriminating statements in the deposition, which he in fact did. He made several incriminating statements during the civil deposition, which resulted in Andrea Constant getting a settlement of $3.4 million. So if you read through the ruling from the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, like I said, it's very lengthy, very thorough, very detailed. Now, one of the reasons Bruce Castor decided not to prosecute, as you can see here on pages 9 and 10, D.A. Castor, Constant's behavior in the year since the alleged assault complicated any effort to secure a conviction against Cosby. As evidenced by the number of telephone calls that she recorded, Constant continued to talk with Cosby on the phone, and she also continued to meet with him in person after the incident. Okay, so right there, it doesn't sound like Bill Cosby is much of a threat if one of his most high-profile victims feels comfortable meeting with him in person after being victimized by him. D.A. Castor found these recurring interactions between a complainant and an alleged perpetrator to be atypical. D.A. Castor also reasoned that the recordings likely were illegal and included discussions that could be interpreted as attempts by Constant and her mother to get Cosby to pay Constant so that she would not contact the authorities. Okay, so the totality of these circumstances ultimately led D.A. Castor to conclude that there was insufficient credible and admissible evidence upon which any charge against Cosby related to the Constant incident could be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Okay, so a couple things. If you're a victim of a sex crime, report it immediately. Okay, I understand and I can sympathize with victims of sex crimes that it's uncomfortable, that it's humiliating, it's scary, it's frightening to come forward with your allegations, feeling like someone may not believe you, that they may label you a liar. But if this has actually happened to you and you really genuinely want justice, then waiting 5, 10, 15, 20 years is not how you do that, when all of the evidence is gone that would corroborate any accusations that you bring forward against the perpetrator. This right here, all of this information provided by Bruce Castor just makes it seem like Constant didn't mind having a relationship with Cosby, but was using that to leverage him in an attempt to get him to pay her, and in exchange for not reporting anything to the police. Okay, so you have that. Okay, so Bruce Castor knew that his witness and his victim was not credible. She would not be credible on the witness stand or testifying because of these circumstances mentioned right here in this highlighted portion of this document. Okay, not to mention the fact that there was such a long delay in the time that the alleged crimes took place to the time that she reported it. So any evidence that would support successfully prosecuting Bill Cosby was gone. So it wasn't as though D.A. Castor was dropping the ball and that he was trying to let someone, a celebrity like Bill Cosby, off the hook for something as serious as rape. It's because he knew, as an experienced district attorney, that there wasn't any evidence that would aid him in successfully prosecuting Bill Cosby. So instead, he did what he could do for the victim, and he promised Bill Cosby that he wouldn't press charges so that he couldn't invoke his Fifth Amendment rights during the civil deposition. Because when there's no threat of criminal prosecution, you don't have Fifth Amendment rights in civil proceedings. So because of that, Bill Cosby could be compelled to make incriminating statements against himself, like I said, which he did. But then those statements were later used by Bruce Castor's successor, Risa Furman. She later became the district attorney, and despite having knowledge of the deal made between Bruce Castor and Bill Cosby, proceeded with criminal charges anyway. Okay, and that's the reason for the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania's decision to vacate Cosby's sentence and release him, is because that violated his rights to due process. If Bill Cosby would have known that criminal proceedings or that criminal prosecution was imminent, he would have had Fifth Amendment protection during the civil deposition, and he would have been able to invoke his right to remain silent and not make incriminating statements. But he was relying on the promise made by Bruce Castor, and then when that was essentially violated by Risa Furman, it was a violation of Bill Cosby's right to due process, and the Pennsylvania Supreme Court recognized that, and that is why I believe that the Me Too movement has backfired on itself, because Risa Furman most likely was emotional about this case, passionate about this case, which district attorneys are not supposed to be passionate or prejudicial. Because if you read through this 79-page document and understand all of the circumstances, Bruce Castor told Risa Furman when she took office and decided to reopen the case against Bill Cosby, he told her, hey, listen, I made a deal with Bill Cosby back when the case was mine, and promised not to prosecute in exchange for his unprotected testimony in the civil deposition. She completely dismissed that and went ahead with the case anyway. Then you have idiots over here from the Daily Beast claiming that it was Bruce Castor's fault. So the Daily Beast is a very liberal news outlet. As you can see, the headline of this article: Bill Cosby walks free because of this power-hungry prosecutor. Okay, the power-hungry prosecutor did what he could to get justice for Andrea Constant, including getting her what she seemed to want in the first place all along, was money. $3.4 million. That was only made possible because of the statements Bill Cosby made during the deposition, which was only made possible because Bruce Castor promised not to prosecute him criminally. Now, let's say Bruce Castor attempted to prosecute him criminally and lost the case. Then where would they be? Bill Cosby would have been set free had he been acquitted. The only reason Risa Furman was successful in her prosecution of the case is because she used the statements made by Bill Cosby during his civil deposition, which would not have happened if Bruce Castor had attempted to prosecute him back in 2005. I believe that's when the original case came forward. So now you're going to have all of the liberal woke feminists of the Me Too movement, which we haven't heard much about lately, but it's starting to resurface because of this case. Claiming that this is all Bruce Castor's fault. That he struck this deal with Cosby. Now, you can read in this document, in the ruling from the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, that Castor believed that he had the authority to make that deal, even though I guess, the state law in Pennsylvania, any type of immunity offered to a suspect or a defendant has to be granted by the judge. However, if you scroll all the way down to the very bottom of this document, to the conclusion, so the discretion, I'll just highlight this. The discretion vested in our this is the justices of the Supreme Court speaking. The discretion vested in our Commonwealth's prosecutors, however vast, does not mean that its exercise is free of the constraints of due process. When an unconditional charging decision is made publicly and with the intent to induce action and reliance by the defendant, and when the defendant does so to his detriment, and in some instances upon the advice of counsel, denying the defendant the benefit of that decision is an affront to fundamental fairness, particularly when it results in a criminal prosecution that was foregone for more than a decade. No mere changing of the guard strips that circumstance of its inequity. Okay, so even though the trial court, when this was first appealed, stated that Bruce Castor, the district attorney at the time, did not have the authority to grant Bill Cosby immunity in exchange for his compelled testimony in the civil deposition, the fact that he is an actor of the court, okay, he's a prosecuting attorney, an actor of the court who made a deal with Bill Cosby and his attorneys, and he promised that he would not prosecute him criminally. So, for the sake of fundamental fairness, that deal, that promise, has to be acknowledged when considering or determining the outcome of this case. Because had that promise not been made, then Bill Cosby would have had his Fifth Amendment rights intact and would have not been compelled to testify against himself in the civil deposition. So, this is the Me Too movement backfiring on itself. This is what happens when emotions prevail over facts and over reason and over the law. It's my opinion that Risa Furman probably succumbed to those emotions, and in all of these articles, and even in this ruling by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, she's quoted as having absolutely no awareness or knowledge of the deal made with Bill Cosby by Bruce Castor, even though Bruce Castor testified that he wrote her a letter explaining the deal in great detail, and that it would be ill-advised of her to proceed with the case, but she dismissed those warnings and went ahead with it anyway. So now I'm not saying that I'm pleased with the outcome here. I'm not saying that I believe Bill Cosby is innocent. It seems like there's plenty of evidence. Well, I guess I shouldn't say that, because if there was plenty of evidence to prosecute and to find him guilty, then Bruce Castor probably would have taken advantage of that and charged him. But the Me Too movement, all of the victims, or at least most of the victims that I was aware of that were showcased in the media, came forward years and years after the alleged crimes against them took place. And it seems to me, now again, I'm not trying to be misogynistic or sexist or bigoted or insensitive, but it seems to me like the only reason they came forward was because there was some sort of monetary compensation to be gained. Okay, we have people like Bill Cosby and Harvey Weinstein and Brett Kavanaugh. Most of these people were celebrities, or at least in a position of power, wealthy people who would have been able to settle their cases, which Bill Cosby obviously did. I don't remember if Harvey Weinstein's case was settled civilly for any monetary damages or awards to the victims. But I didn't hear about any just regular Joe Schmo, ordinary, middle class, lower class male perpetrator being called out on the carpet during the Me Too movement because he didn't have anything to compensate his victims with. You can call me misogynistic and you can call me sexist all you want, but on the surface, that's exactly what it looks like. But this is what happens when you cave to the leftist mob, when you cave to the woke mob, and you put feelings over facts. Okay, eventually it will backfire on you, and that's exactly what we're seeing with the defund the police movement. Is elected officials are considering considering emotions and feelings over facts and evidence and statistics and empirical evidence. Okay, at least in the case of the city of Minneapolis, they voted to defund their police department last year, and now it's backfiring on them because crime rates spiked like we knew that they would. And citizens, normal, everyday, law-abiding, tax-paying citizens are getting the brunt of that because they're being victimized because there's a lack of a stable police force in their community. They're losing property. Some of them are losing their lives. Some of them are being victimized every day, and they're fed up with it, and now they're filing a lawsuit against the city of Minneapolis for defunding the police department. So this is what happens when you value emotions and feelings over facts. So, again, Bill Cosby is... I'm not saying that Bill Cosby deserved to be set free necessarily. However, it doesn't seem like there was enough evidence to prosecute and convict him in the first place, at least not before he was stripped of his Fifth Amendment right and compelled to testify. Now, again, it seems like the evidence or the statements that he made during his civil deposition was enough to prosecute and get a conviction. But those statements were obtained illegally, unlawfully, as a violation of his due process. This should not have been used in the criminal case, and his attorneys made that argument during appeals and 404B hearings, but it had to make its way all the way up to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court before that was acknowledged that his civil rights were violated. So that is the reason Bill Cosby his sentence has been vacated and he's been set free. It's not because of any exculpatory evidence that came forward. It's not because the criminal justice system is not interested in justice for the victims. It's because, in my opinion, that the Me Too movement was the only reason Bill Cosby went to prison in the first place, because of an overzealous prosecutor who disregarded the deal made between Cosby and the original district attorney. She let her emotions and feelings get the best of her during the pinnacle of the Me Too movement. And, I mean, if anyone is to blame, perhaps it's her. Because Bill Cosby probably never would have gone to prison in the first place if it wasn't for her actions. And perhaps it would not have given these victims any false hope or false hope for justice. So that's all for today. That's my opinion about the whole Bill Cosby situation. I'm sure I'm going to receive some blowback and some backlash from that, from the feminist community and definitely the woke community. But that's okay. I'm used to that. Again, facts don't care about your feelings. I don't care about your feelings. I care about the law. I care about the facts. I care about the evidence. And in this case, I don't believe it was Bruce Castor's fault that Bill Cosby was released. He did what he could at the time to make sure that Andrea Constand received justice. $3.4 million. Again, it seems like that's what she was after all along, and she got that. Hey, if you guys haven't already, go and check out my book, Never Off Duty. It's available for pre-order. Just go to the link in the description at D'Angelo Publications. Again, my book, Never Off Duty, if you want an honest look at what it's like to be a law enforcement officer in today's society in the year 2021. Purchase the book. Again, it's available for pre-order. It'll be released in September. Thank you all so much.